Hello to everyone watching. I'm Jo Francis, CoramBAAF's Publishing Manager, and today I'm talking to Amelia Goswell, Meryl Westlake and Eva Sprecher about their new children's book, Where Did My Dinosaur Go? This is a charming picture book about moving to live somewhere new and learning to trust new people. It's ideal for children in foster care, kinship care, private fostering, many other situations. Eva and Meryl, who helped write the book and headed the project, are researchers at University College London. They're studying how we can support children in care with mental health issues. Amelia has great interest in the subject and she helped put words to the story. So hello everybody.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Thank you for joining me today. Eva, this is a charming book, I've got to say. And it was a real joint effort. There's a whole author team here. Can you describe, how did it come about?
So it's been quite a long and exciting journey, long in a very good way. So some members of the authorial team I got to know quite a while ago because they were interested and involved in some of the research which I've been doing around foster care and the relationships between young people and their foster carers. And I also knew Lauren through other projects we'd done where she'd illustrated bits and pieces for projects about the mental health of care experienced young people. And Lauren had always said, you know, one day I would love to write a children's book about care and growing up in care because of her own experiences. And it sort of was a seed in my head of maybe one day we can make that happen. And there came along the right project, this project about trust in the context of foster care. And we were funded really generously by the Beacon Bursary Programme at University College London to actually get some time to do this, to sit down with Lauren, our care experienced illustrator, with Bradley, a care experienced young person, with Paul, an experienced foster carer, with Meryl, and later Amelia, who will tell us about her involvement, and put together something really exciting. So it really came out of research. It came out of work we were doing at UCL. So it is very research informed, but it also came through that meeting of people with those different experiences.
That is lovely to hear, actually. The fact that you've got that solid research base, but you've got real experience from young people who've been in care and foster carers themselves, which of course is so important. Well, Amelia, there are, as I've said, a lot of people with real-life care experience or who are foster carers involved in the book. What benefits do you think this brought from your part in the project?
Yeah, I mean, I was coming in with not massive amounts of knowledge about care experienced children and foster caring and that kind of thing. I was brought in to kind of help put some words to the story, but that was the extent of my knowledge of the area. I think it would have been a very different book if it had just been, even with kind of the research that these guys have done and then putting it to words, it would have been a good book, but them coming in and adding, I mean, the breadth of experience that they have had has been completely invaluable in having care experience and foster carer involved, just down to kind of broader things about how children might be feeling and specific things to put in, down to tiny little details of, you know, they might mess up their room when they first arrive. That was something that I'd never heard of. I wouldn't have thought about it to put in. And kind of, you know, they might not like the environment that they're in, and it's the struggles with familiarity and how can we put that into the book, which I think when we had test readers as well, that were able to then come back in and say, well, that bit really resonated with me. That bit was something that I can remember from my first day going to a kind of a new home. That was the exact experience I was feeling. That was really nice. And we wouldn't have got that, I think, without their input into it.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's really telling. I think you can tell in the book that these are things that people have actually experienced themselves. So in the book, the two meerkats, Mia and Kit, move to a new home. It could be foster care, although it's deliberately left unlabelled, so it can apply to a range of different situations, and I think that is an important point. The book has some important messages about how children may feel at this time when they come into foster care. What are some of the common things that children are worried about when they come into care, from the experience of your authors?
I guess Amelia sort of touched on some of it. I think a lot of it is that unfamiliarity when you're moving to a new place. You're leaving what was your home and those people who cared for you, and you're sort of transitioning into this new home. And I guess there's so many layers of what's unknown in that new environment. So I think that can be very sort of worrying for children of what is it going to be like. And then even once you're there, not knowing what are the routines like, what are the rules, things are kind of unfamiliar in many different ways. So I think those sort of different elements that a child's getting used to.
It's the sort of things we take for granted, isn't it?
Yeah,
like
definitely.
what time you go to bed, do you sit at the table to eat dinner, do you not, do you, like how do you choose what you're going to eat, all this sort of thing.
And I think there are things which, it might even be just so hard to put into words, like the whole different rhythm of a household. It's like you're like learning a whole new way of family and a way of living together. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that young people are doing that, and that's really hard for them, but also to acknowledge that foster carers are having to learn a whole new person and what they like and what they don't like and what suits them and what doesn't suit them and their sort of daily rhythms. And that's a whole journey as well. So it shouldn't be that young people feel that they're in it alone. It should be something that foster carers and young people are coming together to learn about each other. But obviously for young people, it's going to be a lot more because the foster carer knows, what time they normally have dinner and go to bed.
Yeah.
So, and also I think it's important to say that some young people might behave in ways that foster carers might find a bit hard to unpick. Like, why is that happening? What's going on there? But young people may have developed these ways of being because that's what helped them survive where they were living before or in the many places they've lived before. And sometimes it can be really painful for a foster carer to be like, I'm doing all the right things. I'm trying my best. Why is this young person still messing up their room when I've made it really nice? But being really curious about what's going on behind that is so important.
Absolutely.
I think that's something we tried to emphasize in the book that I know we'll come to, but that sort of curiosity from the foster carers and really thinking about what the experience is for the young person, but then being quite kind of understanding to themselves that, like Eva was saying, they're in this journey together, and it's a sort of, it takes time. I guess that's like kind of a key message in the book. It takes time to build those relationships and sort of understand each other.
I think you can really see that from your foster carer character Becky in the book, where it takes time. She's very patient about learning these new meerkats who've come to her foster carer. And it's a journey from both ways, as you say. But it is about that curiosity and that patience, I think. So what are some of the practical things that foster carers like Becky in the book can do to help children in this process?
It can be really hard to put your finger on exactly a set of rules that every foster carer could follow because every young person's different.
Of course.
And parenting, caring for every young person's different. But I think what we've touched on there about being curious, wondering what is going on behind what I'm seeing on the surface, like where is that coming from, and being empathetic about that, acknowledging that if there is behaviour which might sometimes feel really tough to respond to, that it's not just naughtiness, it's there for a reason. Young people might be behaving those ways because that's what allowed them to survive. Really being consistent, trying to be really transparent about things. I know that Paul, who there'll be another interview with him to watch, has loads of practical tips from his experience of foster care over the years. But I think that consistency, doing what you're going to do, being transparent, being available, being there, and trying to get to know a young person as early as possible. What food do they like? How do they want their room? Do they want a nightlight on? All those little things really make a difference.
And Amelia, I know there's a point in the book where the meerkats, they're given peas in their spaghetti at the start, and that this is a problem. And by the end of the book, we find that clearly there has been some discussion behind the scenes between the foster carer and the children, and that this has been solved. And it was nice to see that sort of little
Nod back to, yeah, that was another thing that came out of, I think, having kind of Bradley and Paul and Lauren, having anything that we'd set up in the beginning, that the food wasn't quite how they liked or the room wasn't quite how they liked. By the end, spaghetti comes without peas and they're kind of tucked into bed the way that they enjoy, and even down to the kind of bird social worker figure is back at the end, because that was something that came out that it's nice to see that character come back and know that they're checking in, and kind of test children readers were worried that this bird figure has disappeared and wouldn't come back again. So there was a few sort of bits that we've tried to resolve with varying subtlety kind of towards the end of the book, to show, it's not a linear thing. Becky makes mistakes and she's not perfect, but she continues to try and interact with the children and will learn what they like best. And by the end, a lot of those things have been implemented.
And there's compromise in both areas as well, because say taking the peas out of the spaghetti, that's doing what is going to feel really comfortable to Mia and Kit, the meerkats. But the brushing the teeth, they get used to brushing the teeth, and you see them later in the book, just that becomes a routine. So it's that balance of what the foster care is bringing, what the young person's bringing, and coming to a middle place which feels okay.
And this is a slightly different note, but I was thinking that sort of practical things, I guess, that you were saying, sort of getting to know what they like and don't like, but also in activities, I think doing the sort of joint activities. And I guess that's partly where, linking to the book, this kind of came from as well. Is it something that can be done together, and then starting those conversations? Because that's something we spoke about quite a lot, is particularly related to the sort of booklet and including questions, is it's really hard to have those conversations. And so I guess doing things like reading the book together and then being able to sort of open up that space so that the child knows, actually, this is something we can talk about. These are really difficult things, but this is something I'm able to go to you and speak with. So sort of when the foster care or whoever the carer is sort of is able to name something and bring something up, hopefully that then kind of says to the child, this is okay, we can speak about this, even if it's quite difficult to have those conversations.
I can see that. That's clearly really important. Absolutely. And a real reassurance to the child as well.
And it's finding the right moment for that as well, because the first day is not going to be the time to open up that conversation. It's like taking all the toys out of the box and then feeling like, how are we going to get this back in, and for everyone to feel calm and ready for bed. But just being sensitive to young people's cues. We're not expecting foster carers to sit down with the book first time and rattle through every question in the booklet, but it's just something to build towards, perhaps. Exploring.
Now, Eva, I know you've got a particular interest in this subject from your research. The book does talk about the difficulties children can have with trust. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that and how that comes into the book?
Yeah, so we know from research that if young people, or really anyone, has had a really difficult start in life with relationships which have been quite confusing or scary at times, that can really affect the way that we trust other people. Maybe that will look like really not trusting people. Maybe it will look like trusting people too much and maybe not the right people. What we explored in our research is for young people who come to live in foster care and have those experiences of, maybe not trusting people very much, with reason, because that's what they've had to do to keep safe. Then how does that change over time when they have a relationship with a foster carer? And what we found were a few things. So firstly, over time, young people did find that they were able to trust more, based on having those consistent relationships with foster carers who are available and did what they said they were going to do and were emotionally warm and there for them. But that process was really gradual, and it wasn't a straight line. It wasn't just every month there was a little bit more trust. Trust gets built and trust gets broken, and you see that in the book when the toys, the dinosaurs, get washed, and that's a breaking of trust for me and Kit with Becky. But then it can be built up again with that patience. And the last thing which we found in the research is that when that trust has built a little bit more, that young people are then able to feel more comfortable and have better well-being in other aspects of their lives, making friends, just feeling more secure, maybe being able to focus on education a bit more. And so that's kind of what the research showed us in its early stages still. But yeah, we tried to get those messages across in the book.
I think that's really important, the idea that it's not just a linear process. It's not necessarily going to be a set of positives. You may step back, but you will then be able to step forward again. And then that does free up children's brains, as you say, for being able to focus on other things like education, their friends, that sort of thing.
I guess that's something we're hoping in the book, although it's obviously targeted for children. Actually, hopefully as foster carers reading the book as well, you sort of see that in that these mistakes will happen, but actually it's okay. You can sort of, in some ways, it's an opportunity to then repair and sort of do kind of new things to then speak about that and address that.
Yeah. Especially because foster carers can feel often really hurt and confused. Why does this young person not trust me when I've tried to do everything right? But yeah, understanding that protective role of that not trusting people is, I know I've said it many times, but it's so important. And so foster carers can have a bit of grace for themselves to understand, you know, it's not that you're being untrustworthy. It's just going to take time, and they're going to be ups and downs.
Yeah, for sure. And we've touched on the booklet or the pamphlet that comes along with the book. It's a short pamphlet in the back of the book, which has a range of prompts, questions, discussion points, to help spark discussion with children, really. So it's for foster carers or for social workers to really help make sure they're getting the most out of the book. Now, Eva and Meryl, you guys put this together and did a very good job, I have to say. There's a lot of helpful prompts in here. Have you got any particular tips for the adults who are reading the book with the child to help them get the most out of the book?
I think something, I was thinking about this before, because I think there is quite a lot of, it's not loads all broken down, the information, but actually I think if it was me, and I think potentially for foster carers, it could be beneficial to just have a look yourself initially, sort of read the book and have a look at the pamphlet, just because we provide sort of example questions that link to pages in the book. But before each of the questions, we provide a bit of information that kind of links Mia and Kit to children in foster care, just to sort of make that direct link to try and help explain things a bit further. And I guess in that sense, it also links a bit more directly to the research. So we kind of hope that that might be quite helpful for foster carers to learn a little bit as they're reading that. So I would sort of recommend having a look first. And like Eva mentioned previously, it really depends on the child, how they want to access the book. You might just want to look at the pictures. You might want to just read that. You may think some questions might be helpful, but you think actually at the moment they're not. So I think it's probably quite useful to have a look at that first, and maybe then have a think what would be most appropriate for the child, and sort of let them lead how they might want to engage with that, and whether it's the right time, or maybe, you know, in a year's time when you've read it many times, you might want to, I hope, you might want to then, you know, have some of those conversations. If you'd add anything to that.
No, I think maybe just to say the book, and all our advisors felt really strongly about this. The whole author team really wanted this to be a book which could be on any young person's shelf.
Yeah.
So it's not sort of screaming out, this is a book for a young person in foster care only. There's a place for that, and it's really important. But it may be that as a dipping the toes in, you might just read it. It's just a book. It's just a really nice story. And then it might be, only over time that the links to young people's own lives might sort of get pulled out when it feels appropriate.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool that there's so many questions for each section that you can read it. I mean, hopefully hundreds of times, and hopefully it'll be something that a child wants to read over and over and over again. And every single time, sometimes it'll just be reading the book, but there's a different question that can come up each time. There's so many iterations of sort of conversations you can have off the back of that, from quite casual sort of, do you have a favourite teddy of your own, up to, you know, do you want to have a bigger conversation about what makes you feel safe in the home, and that kind of thing. So there's such a range of conversations you can have off the back of the pamphlet, hopefully.
And hopefully as well, it just sort of starts then. By no means you have to follow the set questions that we've put in. Hopefully they maybe also just help foster carers have some ideas of what they think the child might be interested in, but sort of linked to these sort of topics. So hopefully it's sort of a bit of a springboard just to help think about how you maybe could bring that up with the child to speak to them.
Within individual children and their individual circumstances. Yeah, definitely. Oh, well, thank you very much. This has been a fascinating discussion, and thank you very much for coming in to talk to us today. Any final message for social workers when it comes to this subject, or for fostered children out there?
I think it just comes back to that sort of patience and really trying to give time for these relationships to emerge. It's so hard for foster carers and for young people to build something out where previously there wasn't anything there. And lots of young people we spoke to have said things like, I don't even know what it's meant to look like. No trust. Where's the maximum there? How much trust is too much? And that's not something you pick up in just a month. And so, yeah, just really giving that patience and empathy for foster carers as well, who are often really, really trying their best.
And I guess maybe something more broadly is something that felt so important to us throughout is just how care experience is at the kind of core of this book and everything that it sort of stands for. And I guess we hope that also is communicated to children by the foster carers or through sort of social care professionals, of sort of, knowing that someone who is care experienced has created this and created it because they wanted to help other children in care. That feels really important, that hopefully will come through as well if you're reading, even if that's a conversation that you have. That feels quite helpful to sort of see these figures who are care experienced doing something like this. So we hope that will also come from this book as well.
Keep an eye out for the interview with Lauren and Bradley, who will be talking about what it was like to be care experienced people working on it.
Absolutely. And this is only the first interview that we've published with the author and illustrator team who wrote and illustrated Where Did My Dinosaur Go? Make sure to keep an eye out for our next interview with other members of the team, where we talk with Paul Calder about his involvement in the book, his role as a foster carer, and his most memorable fostering moments. That interview will go out as part of Foster Care Fortnight, so do look out for that. Thank you very much for watching.